Welcome back, everybody. We're about to dive headfirst back into the world of iPad caricatures with a caricature drawing from start to finish of Iman Evans from Phoenix, Arizona. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up ArtStudio and I'm going to start a new image. Now I'm going to add in all of my layers. There's a max of 6 layers, and I'm going to go to my second to the bottommost layer for my undersketch. What I have here, look very closely, these are my brush settings for my main pencil brush. Kind of gives the effect of a marker and gives you those dagger strokes that we like so much. So now I'm getting into my undersketch. Remember, this is on the second to bottommost layer. You want to keep that bottom layer open and completely white. And what I do is I go into my pencil and I mess with the different opacities just so I can have a nice loose sketching style that I can eventually draw over. So now I'm just looking at Iman's photo on Facebook as my reference, and I'm blocking everything in very loosely. This process shouldn't take any longer than a couple minutes. So I am blocking it in, and I'm about to go into that layer and knock the opacity down so it's a little clearer to draw on top of. So now I've got my pencil tool at its full opacity so you can get those really nice sharp blacks. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just blocking everything in. I'm going into the hair. I'm showing that there is a little bit of a shadow, point of light on the top of the head. And there's also a nice little trick they do with the eraser to kind of add a feel of texture. I go in with the eraser tool on the same layer, and I'll just add little points of texture just to kind of show that the hairline isn't as tight as it is in real life. Or I'm sorry, it's a little loose. So now what I'm doing is I am making a very dark brown line. The interior line work for the interior of the face, I'm not sure if you can tell on the tutorial right now, but I am in fact using a very dark brown line for all of the features in the interior of the face. So now it's pretty cut and dry. As you can see, I'm going back and forth between the line thickness to get certain effects. And actually, I want you to see this right here. Sometimes you can't get the dagger strokes you want, so you just take your eraser tool and you shape it up to create the line that you actually want. So this obviously isn't in real time. I am slowing things down when there are very important points that I want to make, or just little tricks that I've learned over the past few months that I want to impart on you guys. But overall, this drawing took about an hour from start to finish, and I've managed to condense it down in this video to a nice little 19 minutes and 30 seconds. So right now I'm still doing dark brown line work. For the exterior of the head, I'm now using black just to keep it sharp, to keep it bold. And now I'm going to go back in with my, I'm still using black here. As you see, it's really hard for me to tell looking at the video which is dark brown, which is black, but right now I'm back into dark brown, and now I'm just going back to black with the his little scarf. Now what I'm doing right here is I actually went underneath my initial drawing layer so I could add in more line work without interfering with the brown lines that I had already laid down. If you keep trying to draw everything on the uppermost layer or on the same layer, every now and then you might accidentally draw on top of a colored line that you'd already laid down, and you have to edit that later. But by going in the layer below it, I'm not interfering with any of the line work that I've established on the very top layer. So as you see, there's lots of zooming in and out, and when you're doing an iPad caricature, it's not, since it is such a small plane that you're drawing on, it's really important for you to zoom in and out constantly to get all the details that you want out of your drawing. Right now you can't really see it, but I added little white lines to differentiate the bottom of his goatee from the shadow in his scarf. Now I'm going back over with some black line in certain areas, whereas his upper eyelid is, I went over that brown line with a black line. And you're going to see a lot more of that later on. I'm going to go back over certain parts of the face with a black line just to make it a little bolder and make it stand out a little bit more. And now I'm going on top of the layers and I'm going to go to a dark pink line for his headphones. You don't. It's not mandatory to do colored lines, but I find that if you use them sparingly, you can get a really cool, nice cartoony effect, or you can add a little bit more, um, pizzazz to the drawing. And now we got the headphones down. As you can see, I drew that on top of my other layer, so I'm erasing just to clean it up a little bit. And boom. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to go into my sketch layer here, and I'm going to get rid of it. That way the only thing you see right now is my actual line work. And then what I'm going to do is, since I'm taking up 3 layers currently with my line work, I'm going to unsee the 2 layers that are currently not being used, and I'm going to merge all of my line work layers into one layer. And by doing that, I just consolidated all those layers into one, and now I can use more layers for color. You're going to find that you're going to be doing this a lot as things get more advanced. You want to utilize as many of those layers as possible, especially if you're going to be messing with different opacities and stuff like that. It's always important to save. What I'm going to do right now is I'm saving it under Iman. And now that I've done that, if you set your settings to autosave, it will just keep saving periodically, so you don't have to worry about doing it all the time. And it will save it under the file name Iman, or whatever file name you choose. If you remember the other tutorials, I'm using the lasso tool right here. And now I'm selecting 2 different shades of brown. I got my lighter shade there, and now I'm doing a little swapperoo and going into a darker shade for my gradient. As you can see here, there are different gradient settings. There's bilinear, where it sprouts out through the middle. Radial is more of a spherical shading, but I'm just going straight up linear, which is half and half. And as you can see, I just tried to match up in a very loose manner the light that's hitting his face in the image. I'm going in with a bluish gray for the hair. I always recommend bluish gray. I just think it stands out a little bit more. And now we're going to go in with the lasso tool again, and now I'm going to do a gradient of grays. Sometimes I like to use cool grays, sometimes I like to use warm grays. In this case I'm using warm to cool. And I'm stopping here because sometimes the lasso tool is not as accurate as you'd like it to be. So if that is the case, if you hold down on a particular color, preferably right next to where you missed, you can actually match it up perfectly just by coloring right over it. And now we're back in super speed mode. Now, all the coloring that's taking place right now is on the same layer. It's actually the second to bottommost layer, and the gradient and everything I'm doing right now is all in the same layer. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do something different. I'm going to go to a layer above it, and I'm going to start blocking in some shading. Now, I don't want you to concern yourself so much with the color you're using for your shading. Obviously you want to use a darker brown, but it could be a cool brown, it could be a warm brown, preferably a warm. But what I'm going to be doing here is I'm laying down the shading, and what I'm going to do later is I'm going to go into the layers opacity, and I'm going to change the opacity to a level that I like, and then I'm just going to keep adding onto that with consecutive layers. When you color in a program like this, a lot of people assume that they can just go right into it by like a paintbrush, which you can. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not my particular cup of tea and my style. I'm more of a layerer. I like to keep adding and adding and adding, and also I like to keep experimenting with different gradients of colors, or different the coolness and warmness of different colors to see how they work together. So I'm still adding in shading. I'm still using the same shade of brown for everything right here. And as you can see, it does look a little dark right now, but once I go into the layers properties and mess with the opacity, I'll be able to make it a lot more subtle. And you're going to be seeing me do that very soon. So right there, that bottom bar is the layer opacity. I'm sliding it back and forth just to give you an idea as how the color changes. Right there, it's at about 65 to 70% of the opacity I had it at before. And now I'm adding in some shading to the scarf right here. Use your knowledge that you've gathered over the years. I've got photo reference right here in front of me. You could be a slave to the photo reference, or you can just kind of go your own road and put the shading where you want. Now I am on. I'm going to go another layer up, and I'm going to add a gradient of a warm, dark red to add a little more of a smooth shading effect to the image. And what I'm doing right now is, like I said, the lasso tool is not 100%, so sometimes you have to do some cleanup. So I'm just getting my eraser and I'm doing some cleanup. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go into the layer properties by holding down on the layer, and I'm going to change it to a multiply layer. The difference between what I had there before and what I have now is a multiply layer actually shows all of the color and all the shading going on underneath it, whereas if you just put flat color on top of it, it's not going to give you that effect. And now I've got my eraser. I'm just erasing away at what I've established with the gradient. Gives it a really smooth effect and makes the lighting seem a little more natural, or as natural as a cartoony image can look. So I'm just plugging away with my eraser. Now your eraser does have different settings. Right now it's in the hard setting. It's very graphic, but as you'll see as I progress with this, I'm going to hop in with a softer and knock the opacity down a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't have the desired effect, so that's why there's a back button. But what I'm doing right here is I'm just kind of softening up a few of those harsh lines and making them just a little bit, a little bit smoother. Now, as you can see, as I'm going through, I'm going to each progressive layer. Right now, I'm a layer above everything I've just done here, and now I'm adding in some really soft darkness with my airbrush tool. It's not a science. You're not always going to get the line you want, so I do a lot of cleanup after I add those lines in with my eraser. As you can see, I'm going to do some cleanup around the nose, a little bit around the lips. My best advice is to just knock the opacity down as much as you can, so you're not laying on these harsh, blurry lines that just don't work with the image. And there's the cleanup I'm doing right there. So as you can see, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to consolidate all those layers, merge them into one. Now just remember, you always want to unsee the layers that you do not want to merge. In this case, the bottom layer and the pencil layer on the very top. If you mistakenly merge the bottom layer with everything, then you won't be able to add in a background later. You're going to be stuck with flat white. And you don't want that, trust me. Well, you do sometimes. I'm just adding in some more shading here with my airbrush tool. A little bit of red for the lips. His bottom lips got a lot of red coloration, so I'm adding that in there. And then just a few more details. Now I'm throwing in that hot pink on the headphones and adding in some light shading, not getting too crazy with the detail there. Now, one thing I'm doing here that, most times I probably wouldn't recommend. I'd probably go a little softer in hindsight, but I did add in some really, really sharp highlights. Now, it's really easy to fix these by kicking the opacity down. Makes it look a little more natural, a little less out there. But sometimes I really like going bold with it. And as you can see, I added a nice little soft glow with my airbrush tool around it, just so it kind of pops a little bit more. It's definitely not natural, but hey, it's a cartoon, And what I'm doing here is you're going to see I'm going to go multiply again. You see, this is the difference between regular color and then going multiply. It really, darkens it up and makes it look a lot more natural. And I'm just going into some other spots, getting some last minute dark spots. And now what I'm doing is I'm tracing over some of that brown line work with a black line Sometimes if you do colored lines and you add in a lot of shading, sometimes those lines can appear a little more muted. So I'm just going over the lips with some black. I'm going to go into his nostrils with the black as well. And I went over his ear to really make those things stand out just a little bit more than they did before. Of course, you got to add some soft highlights to the eyes just to show there's a little moisture, a little bit of light hitting him. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the line work on his scarf. I chose one of my brushes. It's a brush that comes with the app. It's not, this isn't a custom brush I made, but it kind of gives a nice little fabricy plaid type of feel. And then I just kick the opacity down and kind of add a few more lines, and then I just adjust the opacity of the layer to see what works, what doesn't. In this case, I'm just going to leave it at its full opacity and just rock with it. And now I'm just going to add in some last minute highlights with like a yellow base, just to kind of mute that yellow or that white a little bit. And keep in mind, I'm using a really soft brush. The opacity's down pretty hardcore on this, so I'm not really making insane adjustments there. Now I want you to see what I'm doing here right now. I'm on the very bottom layer, the white layer, and I just made a rectangle. A lot of people like to do backgrounds, background color in their images. So I'm just going to show you a few tricks that I like with some filters. Right now I've got the blue lay down on there, and I'm going to add some lighter blue lines through it. And I'm going to show you a few filters that'll really make those backgrounds pop or just add a little extra flair to them. Don't overthink your backgrounds. Don't get too busy with them. That's the worst thing you could do. Looks terrible. This is a little simpler. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the noise filter, and what that does is it adds almost like a print feel to it. You can really get harsh with the noise, or you can be very light and subtle, but it gives it a print-like feel where it's not as crisp and smooth. One thing I've also seen that's really fun is the pixelize option, where you can make it look like an 8-bit or 16-bit video game background. And it really, if you go in with like 3 or 4 different colors or different shades, it really makes that background pop quite a bit. But I've been pretty simple with my backgrounds as of late, so I'm just going to keep it white. I'm actually going to delete that layer and just pop in an all white layer and just roll with that. Really just want to focus on the person I just drew. So. Now it's just like one last splash to kind of make it stand out a bit. I'm going to add my signature in here, but I'm also going to add some splashes of white to the outside of his face. Really soft. It'll add a little bit of a white coloration to the line work, but it'll just make it appear as if some white light is coming from behind and kind of washing out a little bit of his face. It's an effect I like, given this is a very cartoony type of style, but sometimes you do really little things to add a little more credence to the work to make it, pop a little bit more. And there you go. We got Iman Evans. Biggity bam. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to merge all of my layers. Merge visible. Boom. And now it's just one layer. And I'm going to export it to my camera roll, which is what I use to, put these images on Facebook. This is not going to be a full resolution image. I just want to make that very clear. When you put it to your camera roll, it's going to be a very bare bones image. But you can always email yourself a PNG or a PSD, which is the full resolution image, and that way you have that for your own personal records, and you can always email it to the client, and they can do whatever they want with it after that. And there you go. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a wonderful